It was supposed to be a simple birthday celebration. Just the two of us, a few close friends, a small dinner at a cozy restaurant, and a cake that looked a little too big for the occasion. Nothing fancy. I'd never been one for grand gestures or extravagant parties. I liked the idea of keeping things intimate, real. Jason, my husband, had always been a fan of quiet evenings, and I loved that about him. He wasn't the type to seek attention or make a big deal out of his birthday. This year, I wanted to make it special, even if I wasn't feeling particularly special myself. I had been struggling with so much lately: my job, the pressure of parenthood, the constant feeling of not being good enough. But this night was about him. I was going to give him a good time, even if I had to fake it. He seemed happy when I greeted him with a smile and a kiss. He looked so handsome in his blue sweater, the one I had bought for him last Christmas, the color making his eyes stand out more than usual. I couldn't help but notice how beautiful he looked. And for a moment, I thought maybe I was being a little too hard on myself. I was lucky to have him. We sat down at the table, and the conversation flowed easily at first. Friends chatted and laughed, and we all shared memories from the past. Jason's smile lit up the room, and I felt a brief sense of peace. The weight of everything I was carrying temporarily lifted. I was relieved to see him happy. I wanted him to be happy. I knew deep down that the tension between us wasn't just his fault. It was mine too. As the night wore on, the drinks started flowing and the mood lightened. I could feel myself loosening up, the pressure in my chest slowly melting away with every sip of wine. That's when I made the mistake. It started as a joke, one of those things you say to break the ice or make people laugh. But I should have known better. In hindsight, I should have known it wasn't the right time or place. You know, I said, trying to make light of the heavy atmosphere that had been lingering for weeks. You're lucky I didn't abort our kid. Can you imagine the mess that would have been? I laughed, trying to ease the awkwardness I'd been feeling for weeks. Jason's expression faltered for a moment, but I didn't catch it. I thought he was just surprised by my words, so I kept going, assuming he would laugh it off. But the room fell silent. His face changed immediately, the warmth fading from his eyes. His lips tightened, and for a moment, it felt like the air in the room had gone still. The light-hearted tone I had been trying to create was gone, replaced with a suffocating tension. My joke hadn't landed the way I had hoped, but surely it couldn't have been that bad, right? Jason didn't say anything at first. He just stared at me, his eyes narrowed, his mouth drawn into a tight line. The silence stretched out, and I could feel my heart begin to race. The laughter from the table had stopped, and everyone was looking at me, waiting for something to happen. But there was nothing. Just the sharp sting of my words hanging in the air. Emily, what the hell did you just say? His voice was cold, cutting through the silence. The anger in his tone was palpable. I felt a chill run down my spine, and suddenly, I was no longer in control of the situation. The night had slipped through my fingers like sand, and I couldn't stop it. I opened my mouth to explain, to laugh it off, to make some kind of excuse for what I had said. But the words didn't come. Instead, I sat there, frozen, my breath shallow, as his gaze remained locked on me. You think that's funny? He asked again, his voice shaking. You really think that's something you should joke about? I was panicking now. I could feel my face flush, my hands trembling. I had messed up big time. But how could something I thought was harmless be taken so badly? I wasn't being serious. It was just a stupid joke. I looked around at our friends, but they were all avoiding eye contact, unsure of what to say. They must have been as uncomfortable as I was. Maybe even more so. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. But it was too late. Jason stood up from the table abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. The noise felt louder than it was, each scrape echoing through the room. I watched in disbelief as he grabbed his coat and started walking toward the door. He didn't look at me. He didn't say anything else. He just left. The door slammed behind him, and I was left sitting there, completely still. I could hear the faint hum of the conversations from the other tables, the clinking of glasses, the sounds of a normal evening continuing without me. But inside, everything felt broken. I had lost him. The joke had been too much. It had broken something between us that I didn't know how to fix. The room was silent for a moment longer, before someone awkwardly cleared their throat. But it didn't matter. Jason was gone. and I was left with the realization that I had lost him, not because of anything major but because of something small, something I thought was just a joke. The weight of that hit me harder than I could have ever imagined. The hours after Jason left felt like they were stretching on forever. I could still hear the door slamming in my head, replaying the sound over and over again as if it was some kind of twisted soundtrack to the mistake I had just made. I didn't know what to do with myself, so I stayed in that same seat, staring blankly at the table where we had all been sitting just moments before. The laughter, the fun, the camaraderie. It all seemed like a lifetime ago now. My phone was clutched tightly in my hand, and I kept checking it every few minutes, hoping to see a message from him, hoping that maybe I had misread his reaction. Maybe he hadn't left. Maybe he was just stepping outside to cool off and he'd be back soon, laughing it off, the whole thing forgotten. But nothing came. No text, no call. Just the eerie silence of an evening that had gone terribly wrong. I tried calling him a few times, but each time it went straight to voicemail. I left messages, but they all sounded desperate, even to my own ears. "Jason, please, I'm sorry," I said over and over, each voicemail becoming more pitiful than the last. I knew I couldn't take back what I had said. I couldn't undo the words, no matter how much I wished I could. But I had to try to fix it somehow. He had to hear me, had to know that it was just a stupid joke, a moment of me being careless. I didn't mean it. But as the minutes turned to hours, the cold reality set in. He wasn't going to call. He wasn't going to come back. I had lost him, and there was nothing I could do to change it. I went to bed that night alone, the bed feeling impossibly big without him beside me. Every time I turned over, I expected to feel him there, his warmth, his steady breathing. But nothing. Just the empty space where he used to be. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours, my mind racing. I couldn't stop thinking about his face when I said those words. The shock, the hurt, the disbelief. I couldn't remember the last time I had seen him look at me like that. He wasn't just angry, he was hurt. And that hurt was something I couldn't fix with a simple apology or a heartfelt text. The next morning, I woke up to the empty silence of our apartment. It was strange how quiet everything felt. The sounds that usually filled the space, the hum of the coffee machine, the soft clicking of his shoes against the floor, the sound of the shower running, were all gone. It was as if the life had been drained out of the place. And in a way it had. I spent the day pacing around the apartment, unsure of what to do. I couldn't concentrate on anything. Work seemed pointless, my friends' messages felt distant, and nothing seemed to matter without Jason. I missed him already, and I knew I had messed up beyond repair. I didn't even know where he was. He hadn't gone to his parents' house. He would have called me if he had. Maybe he was staying with a friend, but none of his friends had reached out to me. The silence was deafening, and it felt suffocating. Around noon, I got a text from my best friend Sarah. "Are you okay?" It read. "I've been trying to reach you." I didn't know how to respond. How could I tell her that I had ruined everything? That a joke I thought was harmless had destroyed my marriage? I stared at the message for a while, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to explain everything to her, to tell her that I hadn't meant it, that I was sorry. But how could I explain the depth of what had happened when I couldn't even understand it myself? Instead of replying, I just put my phone down and walked to the kitchen. I didn't feel like eating, but I knew I had to. I grabbed a granola bar, took a few bites, and then put it back down. The taste of it seemed so dull, so unimportant. It wasn't hunger I was feeling. It was this overwhelming emptiness that seemed to consume everything I did. I spent the entire day waiting for him to reach out, waiting for the knock on the door or the sound of his footsteps down the hall. But nothing came. The hours dragged on, and with every minute that passed, I felt further and further from him. I couldn't stop thinking about what he must be doing. Was he angry? Was he hurt? Was he even thinking about me at all? Or had he already decided that he was done? That evening I tried calling him again, but still no answer. I sent another text apologizing again, begging him to talk to me. I even sent a message to his brother, asking if he had heard from Jason. But there was nothing. No response. Just silence. It was around midnight when I finally broke down. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The tears came suddenly, uncontrollably. I cried for hours, my body racked with sobs. I cried for the man I had lost, for the mistake I had made, for the emptiness that was now my life. I cried for all the things I should have said, for the things I should have done differently. But most of all, I cried because I had lost him, and I wasn't sure how to live without him. By the time I fell asleep, the pain had already set in. And I knew in that moment that this wasn't just about a joke anymore. It was about everything I had been hiding, everything I had been avoiding, everything I had ignored. And now it felt like I had lost everything that mattered most to me. The next few days were the longest of my life. Time seemed to stretch on in a way I had never experienced before. Every second without Jason felt like an eternity. I spent the majority of my time sitting on the couch, staring at my phone, hoping for a message from him. But it never came. The silence was suffocating. Every time I checked, I found myself hoping that maybe, just maybe, he had finally decided to forgive me. But deep down, I knew that forgiveness wasn't going to come easily, and neither would reconciliation. My mind replayed the incident over and over like a broken record. I couldn't escape it. The look on his face, the shock in his eyes, the way he left without saying a word. It haunted me. I could still hear his voice in my head, asking me what I had said and questioning how I could joke about something like that. I had never seen him look at me like that before. The hurt in his eyes was like a knife to my chest. I had never felt so alone in my entire life. I had hurt the one person I loved most in the world, and now I didn't know how to make it right. But I tried. I sent text messages, wrote long apologies, and even called him a few more times. I tried to explain that I didn't mean it, that it was just a poor attempt at humor, but none of it seemed to matter. My words felt empty. I could see that my apologies weren't reaching him. He wasn't responding, and I was left wondering if I had already lost him for good. Days turned into weeks, and the silence persisted. I felt like I was stuck in some kind of limbo, a place where I was neither moving forward nor backward. Everything around me felt like it was going on without me. People at work started to notice my absence, my lack of energy. My friends reached out, offering support, but I couldn't bring myself to talk about what had happened. I couldn't explain how I had ruined the best thing that had ever happened to me. I was ashamed of myself, ashamed of what I had done. One evening, as I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me, I heard a faint knock on the door. I froze. My heart raced, and for a moment I thought maybe it was him. Maybe he had finally come back. Maybe he was ready to talk. But when I opened the door, I was met with the sight of his brother, Matt, standing there. He looked at me with sympathy in his eyes, but there was something else there too, something I couldn't quite place. "Hey," Matt said softly. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, motioning for him to come in, but I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. I had no idea what to expect. Part of me wanted to beg Matt to tell me where Jason was, to tell me if he was okay, to tell me if there was any chance of reconciliation. But I kept quiet, waiting for Matt to speak first. "I spoke with Jason," Matt said, sitting down at the table. "He's not doing well, Em. He's hurting, and he doesn't know what to do with everything that's happened." I nodded, my throat tightening. "I know. I can't stop thinking about what I said. I didn't mean it. It was a stupid joke, a horrible attempt at humor. I wish I could take it back, but I can't. And now I don't know what to do." Matt looked at me for a long moment before speaking again. "Jason's angry, Emily. He's hurt. But more than that, he feels like you've been shutting him out for a while now. He's been trying to reach you, to talk to you, but every time he tries, it's like you don't hear him. Like you don't want to hear him." I felt a lump form in my throat. I never meant to shut him out. It's just, everything has been so hard lately. Between work and the baby, I felt like I'm drowning. And sometimes I just need to make light of things to cope. But I know I shouldn't have said that. I never should have said that. Matt sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I get it. I do. But Jason doesn't know how to handle all of this, Em. And I think you need to show him that you're willing to fight for him. That you're willing to fight for your relationship. Because right now, he's not sure if he's worth fighting for." I felt like someone had just punched me in the gut. The thought that Jason might think he wasn't worth fighting for broke my heart. He was everything to me, and I had let him down in the worst possible way. I had to find a way to make things right, even if it meant swallowing my pride and being vulnerable. But how? How could I show him that I still loved him, that I still needed him when everything seemed so broken? "Do you think he'll come back?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Matt looked at me with sadness in his eyes. I don't know him, but I do know one thing. You can't just wait around for him to make the first move. You need to reach out. Show him you're willing to fight for this. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. I nodded slowly, taking in his words. I knew he was right. If I wanted Jason back, I couldn't just sit here and wait. I had to be the one to make the first move. I had to show him that I was willing to fight for us. After Matt left, I sat in the quiet of the apartment, thinking about everything he had said. I knew I couldn't let this end like this. I couldn't let my mistake define the rest of our lives. I had to show Jason that I was ready to fight, that I was willing to make things right. But first, I had to start with myself. I had to be honest with him, with myself, and with our relationship. Only then would I have a chance at winning him back. A week had passed since Matt's visit. In that time, I had done a lot of thinking. I had reflected on my behavior, my words, and what I had become in the wake of the fight. It was clear that I had let my own frustrations build up, that I had hidden behind sarcasm instead of facing the real issues between Jason and me. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was fixing things. I couldn't just sit around waiting for a miracle. I needed to show Jason that I was truly sorry, that I was ready to fight for him and for us. The evening came, and I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. My mind was racing. What should I say? How could I make him understand? How could I make him believe that I wasn't the person who had cracked that terrible joke? How could I make him believe that I loved him, that he was the most important thing in the world to me? I looked at myself for a long time, trying to find the courage to pick up the phone and call him. But every time I picked it up, I hesitated. The fear of rejection loomed over me. What if he didn't answer? What if he didn't want to hear from me? What if it was too late? But then I thought about what Matt had said. I couldn't wait for him to reach out. I couldn't wait for him to forgive me. I had to make the first move. I had to take responsibility for my actions. If I wanted a chance to fix this, I had to show him that I was serious. I had to prove that I was willing to fight for us. With a deep breath, I dialed his number. My heart was pounding in my chest as the phone rang. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. My stomach twisted into knots, and I felt like I was about to crumble. But then, on the 4th ring, he picked up. Hello. Jason's voice sounded distant, guarded, almost as if he had been expecting this call but didn't know how to react. Jason, I said softly, my voice trembling slightly. It's me, Emily. There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost hear the uncertainty in his silence. Finally, he spoke. What do you want, Emily? His words stung, but I knew they were coming from a place of hurt. I had caused this pain, and I had to take it if I wanted to have any chance of making things right. I need to talk, I replied, swallowing the lump in my throat. Please, just give me a chance to explain. There was another pause, and I could feel the tension in the air. My hands were shaking, but I held onto the phone, trying to steady myself. After what felt like an eternity, he spoke again. Okay, I'm listening. I exhaled, the relief washing over me, but the weight of the conversation still hung heavy. Jason, I know what I said was completely out of line. I can't even begin to tell you how sorry I am. It was a stupid joke, a terrible attempt at humor. But the truth is, I was scared. I was scared of everything. The baby, the changes, the pressure. And instead of dealing with it, I made a horrible choice. I hurt you, and I don't know how to fix it. There was silence on the other end again. My heart thudded in my chest as I waited for him to respond. I didn't know what he was thinking. Was he angry? Was he going to hang up on me? Finally, he spoke. His voice was quieter this time, less guarded. Emily, I can't tell you how hurt I was when I heard that. I don't know how to explain it. It felt like you didn't care. Like you didn't care about me, about us. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of his words. I do care. I do, Jason. I love you. I've always loved you. But I've been so wrapped up in everything else that I didn't see what I was doing to you. I didn't see how much I was pushing you away. And now I can't take it back. But I want to try. I want to make this right. I don't want to lose you. There was a long silence after I spoke. I could feel his presence even though we were miles apart. My mind raced, wondering if he was thinking about everything I had just said. What was he feeling? Was he even open to hearing me out? Finally, he replied, "You really hurt me, Emily. I don't know if I can just forgive you like that. It's going to take time, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to talk. If you're serious about this, about us." I felt a mixture of relief and guilt. He was willing to try, but could I prove to him that I was serious? Could I show him that I was committed to making things right? "I am serious, Jason," I said, my voice steady now. "I'll do whatever it takes. I know I've messed up, but I'll fight for us. I'll do whatever it takes to show you that I'm sorry and that I love you." He sighed on the other end of the phone. "Okay, we'll take it slow. But I need to see that you mean it." "I do," I replied, my heart finally feeling like it could breathe again. "I'll show you. I promise." After a few more minutes of talking, we agreed to meet the following day. It wasn't a promise of everything being fixed right away, but it was a step forward. A step in the right direction. I had made the first move, and now it was up to me to prove that I was willing to fight for our relationship. As I hung up the phone, a sense of cautious hope filled me. It wasn't the end of the story, but it was the beginning of the next chapter. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could get through this. The next day came quickly. My nerves were on edge as I stood in front of the cafe where Jason and I had agreed to meet. The sky was a dull gray, and the air was cold, making me feel even more uncertain about everything. But I couldn't back down now. I had already made the decision to do whatever it took to show Jason that I was serious, and today would be the first test. I arrived early, sitting at a small table by the window, waiting for him. My mind raced, replaying every moment of our conversation the night before. The weight of everything was still heavy on my chest. What if he was just humoring me? What if he didn't mean what he said about being willing to try? I had been waiting for this moment, hoping it would give me a chance to make things right. But now that it was here, the fear of losing him entirely was gnawing at me. A few minutes later, I saw him walking towards the cafe. He looked different, like he had aged a little in the time since we had last spoken. His eyes, usually filled with warmth and love, seemed distant. The distance between us had grown wider than I had realized. When he walked in, I stood up, and for a brief moment, I felt a tightness in my chest. This was it. I had to face the consequences of my actions, and it wasn't going to be easy. Jason hesitated for a moment before walking toward me. He sat down without saying a word, his eyes locked on mine. We both knew this was going to be an uncomfortable conversation, but I had to try. "I'm glad you came," I said softly, my voice betraying the nervousness I felt. "I know I've hurt you, and I've said things I shouldn't have." Jason didn't respond immediately. He looked out the window, taking in the scene outside. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I had no idea what was going through his mind, but I knew that whatever came next would decide if we had a future together. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "Emily, I've been thinking about everything. About what you said, what I said, what we've both done. And I don't know where we go from here." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had expected some sort of reassurance, some hint that things could be fixed, but all I heard was doubt. I had to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. But I knew that crying wouldn't solve anything. "I know I've messed up," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "But I want to make things right. I want to show you that I can be better. I can be the partner you need. I've been selfish and I've said things that I didn't mean. But I love you, Jason. I love you more than anything." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, as if trying to find some trace of the person he used to know. I could see the pain in his gaze, but there was something else there too. Something that resembled hope, just a flicker of it. "I don't know if things can just go back to the way they were," Jason said, his voice quieter now. "What you said, it wasn't just a joke to me, Emily. It felt like you were telling me that I wasn't enough. That everything I had been doing for you, for us, wasn't good enough." I winced at his words, feeling the sting of the truth in them. He was right. I had made him feel inadequate. I had thrown away all the love and support he had given me with a careless remark that was meant to be nothing more than a poorly timed attempt at humor. "I didn't mean it like that," I whispered. "I swear I never meant to hurt you. It was just a stupid, careless joke. I was scared, Jason. Scared of the future. Scared of being a mother. Scared of everything changing. But that's no excuse. I should have talked to you. I should have been honest with you. instead of hiding behind sarcasm. There was another long pause, and for a moment, I thought he was going to walk away. But then slowly he reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was firm, warm, and it was the first time in days that I felt like I wasn't alone. "I'm not saying I forgive you right now," he said, his voice low but steady. "I need time. But I'm willing to try, Emily. I'm willing to see if we can work through this. I don't know if we can go back to what we had, but maybe we can start over. One step at a time." My heart surged with a mixture of relief and hope. I had never wanted to go back to how things were before. I wanted to move forward. I wanted to prove that I was capable of being the person Jason deserved. But hearing him say that he was willing to try was more than I could have hoped for in that moment. "I'll be patient," I said, my voice soft but determined. "I'll wait for as long as it takes. I'll show you that I can be better. We'll take it slow, but I promise, Jason, I'm not giving up on us. Not now, not ever." Jason nodded, his expression softening. "I believe you. And I don't want to give up either." As we sat there in the cafe, a quiet understanding settled between us. Things wouldn't be easy, and there was no quick fix to the damage I had caused. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was a chance for us to rebuild. Not perfectly, but honestly. With time, patience, and love, we could work through the pain I had caused. In that moment, I realized that love wasn't about perfection. It was about willingness. The willingness to try, to grow, and to make things right. And as Jason and I walked out of that cafe together, I knew that our story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Subscribe to our channel for powerful real stories that touch your heart. Join a community where emotions run deep and every story brings a new perspective. Don't miss out. Hit that bell for weekly updates.